What went wrong with Fire Emblem Engage? Why did it fail off? Why is it bad? Why is it such a failure? Make sure that you ready each time you go on YouTube or any social media for that matter. What a coincidence! Me too. Not to make this too long, I decided to do what every fan of this game wished had happened or wished to do themselves. Make a video about why this game is actually great. Don't get me wrong, there are videos about why it is great. Bless them. But will they get as much exposure as the one that blasts the game? I don't think so, and it's likely to get people arguing they are wrong. But are they though? Is there really nothing good about this game? This is a defense of Fire Emblem Engage, and why it actually is one of the best Fire Emblem game we had in a long time. But before that, really quick, disclaimers ahead. Now that I got this out of the way, let's go. So, what is Fire Emblem Engage? If you watch other videos talking about it, you already know. It is the 17th entry of the Fire Emblem series. Engage was supposed to be just an anniversary game, but the conditions of the development gave the developers enough time to make it the 17th mainline game. Announced on September 13th of 2022, it released on January 20th of 2023. Developed internally by Intelligent System, the game entered development at the same time that Fire Emblem Three Houses was still in development, and it was intentionally designed to be a very different experience from Three Houses, telling a simpler story with a tone more akin to Fire Emblem Awakening. The game was originally supposed to release on 2020, but with the delay of Fuka, who was supposed to release in 2018, but ended up releasing only in 2019, and with the pandemic and the fact that Intelligent System accepted to let Koei Tecmo, their partner for Fuka, release a spin-off based on Fuka's universe, the game ended up releasing only in 2023. According to the Nintendo Dream interview, the devs focused more on the gameplay than the story this time around, in order to attract more new players. The game's direction fell into Tsutomu Tei and Kenta Nakanishi's supervision. The game was produced by Masahiro Iguchi, Genki Yokota, and Toyokazu Nonaka. Nami Komuro is credited as the main writer and scenario director for the game. The art and design were provided by Mika Pikazo, and the music was composed by Yasuhi Sababa, Kazuki Komai, Hiroki Morishita, Takeru Kanazaki, Fumihiro Isobe, and Takafumi Wada. Each of the game's regions was assigned to a different composer. For instance, the First Xenologue soundtrack were composed by Takeru Kanazaki, who also worked on Fuka's soundtrack. Yes, it's exactly why you can hear a bit of Edge of Dawn in some of them. Their main project at the time being Fuka, Intelligent System split the team so that one will work on Engage, while the other will focus on the collaboration with Koei Tecmo. The opening song was sung by Ryo. His identity remained unknown, though some have speculated it might be Ryo from Super Soul, the man who gave give you... Oh.
一番お姫様そういう扱い心得て
Or...
連れて行くあの歌をあの時のあの夜を僕らがいるいつでも会える寂しくないよそこにいるから忘れはしない響けかな懐かしい
But I personally doubt it, as Rio is written with a capital R, and like Rio, and it doesn't feature the supposed label. The ending was sung by Rainy, who gave you...
青い夏の夢の途中へ Rescue me 出会い揺らぎまぶしい絶望 Rescue me 二人を変えてしまう夏を待ってる世界を動き出せ
An expansion pass featuring 4 waves of DLC was announced on December 8th of 2022. The contents include additional emblems, maps, support items, and accessories. The final wave is the Fox Analog story, including 5 new units. Now, the main story. You all know about it, don't you? Lear, a divine dragon, awakened from 1,000-year slumber, and to fulfill the promise they made to their mother Lumera, they go on a quest to collect the 12 emblem rings, artifact possessing the power of heroes from another world, in order to defeat the fair dragon Sombron, who also awakened and threatened the continent of Helios. This is the story of their journey as they find new allies and fight fierce enemies to stop Sombron and save the world. Sounds neat, right? Oh, maybe too generic? Well, that's the Fire Emblem formula. You have one hero that has to defeat one evil dragon to save the world during a war. Simple, straightforward, pretty much the root of Fire Emblem. While this story can involve more twists, it is the usual story for every game. So now, let's go into what makes this game great. From the gameplay to the story and characters. But before that, I have some rules. 1. In the description I put the link to the Tumblr post Fire Emblem Emotional Damage Summary, reducing all the engage analysis posts I made. 2. I will be using the Japanese version, because while many believe they can judge a Japanese game with the translated text, I do not. I am a traditionalist, so if I have to judge the writing, I need to see the original text in its entire authenticity. 3. To explain my points in detail, I will choose one or two examples that I will analyze in depth. Since a video that would be very in-depth of Engage would be over 11 hours long. You don't want an 11 hour long video, do you? 4. I will avoid as much as possible any comparison with Fuka, since comparing the two would be comparing an apple pie with an orange cake, except for the feature common to the game in terms of gameplay such as the time rewind and the wall hub. 5. I will be saying this sentence. I have a Tumblr post a lot because I did a lot of those and I really don't want to repeat myself. Especially when they are very, very, very long. I'd also like to address some of the things that have been said about Engage. The fact that it is not talked about anymore, the fact it dropped, and the constant comparison with Fuka as well as the negativity surrounding this game. So, the idea that Engage is not talked anymore is false. I mean, have you ever tried to search up for Fire Emblem Engage? It has fan content every day, whether it be fan art, fan fiction, or doujinshi. But if you never searched that up, why would you expect to see any content? So I know people compare it to Fuka, but while Engage is not as popular as Fuka, it doesn't change the fact it is one of the most popular JRPG this year. I still talk about it. Mutuals of mine do too. People I follow on social media and who follow me do too. In fact, my Engage content got me a lot of new followers on Tumblr, and I am grateful for that. Thank you guys! Also, not the fact that it's sold less than Fuka. Well, I fail to see the problem here. The devs said they were trying to create an awakening effect, so if you want to compare the sales, you should do it with Awakening rather than Fuka. And you know how much Awakening sold in its first month? That's right! According to the current sales, Engage is slowly catching up to Awakening's current sale. Also, there is something that needs to be said about the development of each game and their budget. Fuka sold over 4 million copies. However, we know it had a rush development. It was delayed for no reason when it released. Most of the content was cut, including entire chapters cut out. Most of the data that was supposed to be in the game from the get-go could only be implemented in the game through the DLC, etc. These, coupled by the amount of catered dialogue in a game where, depending on your choices, actors will have to read several of the lines, and that has 4 stories and 3 writers, and the data we know about the budget invested made it obvious that Fuka was a financial black hole, eating a lot of money from its gen system that will still have to share with Koei Tecmo what they gained. So the fact that it sold 4 million is actually good news because it might have costed much more had the project failed. Ooh, don't want to think about this, do you? In comparison, Engage, as a little project that ended up becoming a mainline game because the devs had enough time to polish everything, is clearly a finished product without any rush deadline and who had very little cut content. Not only did it have a smaller budget, but being developed internally means that the current sales are enough for the team to consider it to be an internal success. Especially with the manga written with mangaka Katsuro Kiyo that promotes the game and that is now being published as a volume and is therefore likely to help gain more money of the story and the characters. And that's not talking about the goodies, the hard book, and the possibility of a drama series. Besides, as Engage was developed at the same time as Fuka, this means Fuka didn't sold any copy yet, therefore it makes sense that the devs wouldn't expect Engage to make this much as Awakening and Fate didn't either. I won't repeat the same points made by countless videos about how Fuka had a bigger marketing or that it was out in summer with little competitor, whereas Engage released in winter. However, the choice for Engage regarding the direction is interesting, and I'll be talking about this later. If you see it as a bad thing, that's on you. Cause for an RPG to fail, they need to sell 100. And that's not Engage's case. It's one of the most selling games this year, just under Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And it still sold more than 3 hopes. Besides, what's the point you're trying to make? A game's sales are no indicator of its quality. By this logic, if a game is available for free, then it must be crap. And that's false. An example? Mudfather, it's free. Hib, it's free. Pocket Mirror, it's free. Chloe's Requiem, it's free. Fantasy Maiden's Whole Hangout, it's free. And so on and so on. Anyway, it's not as if Engage was stopping from being sold entirely. The same can be said about the fan-based activity, no indicator of the quality. The word underrated exists for a reason, and as someone who enjoys a lot of media that have a small fandom despite it being very good, really, Engage is pretty popular for what it is. And if you believe that Engage is the only game that received the "why did it fail off" allegation, let me tell you, nope! Cause I saw people asking themselves why the Tears of the Kingdom fell off due to the little content they saw of that game. Same thing for Xenoblade 3. Same thing for literally every game that came out this year, even freaking Honkai Star Rail! This is a game epidemic, I'll tell ya. But we still talk about Fuka to this day, and it's a game that is 4 years old. And we still talk about Awakening to this day, and it's a game that is a decade-year old. And don't get me started on Seisei no Keifu. Besides, Engage still received a lot of positive reviews from critics, and it is currently nominated for the Golden Joystick Award, and it's second in the score for highest downloads of the year in Japan. And seeing how Intelligent Systems' prime target is Japanese, they will obviously take that as a success. That and the fact that the game is more appreciated by most of the Japanese fanbase. Not that it doesn't have a fanbase in the West, but... how do I say this delicately? Well, all the bad reviews on YouTube scares fans off. And not just those who didn't get to play the game yet. No. Even actual fans of the game who feel like they don't have the right to express their love for the game, and therefore they avoid doing so. I know it! They told me! Many people who enjoyed Engage told me they never spoke of it simply because it is so hard to find a place that speaks positively of this game. And it doesn't matter now if a video will not be too harsh on it, because the moment they see the title One Run Wrong with Pictopoly, they will expect the worst. Because there's barely any content that spreads positivity about this game. And thus, here I am. So, it's incorrect to say Intelligent System was trying to copy the aesthetic of Genshin Impact when Engage was developed and finished before Genshin Impact even released. The reason why they look similar is simply because they were developed in the same engine, Unity. You know, that Unity! Another minor correction, but Nami Komuro, the main writer and scenario director for Engage, is not the one who wrote Awakening and Fate stories. She was part of the main writing crew for both games, but she is not credited as the main writer. For instance, in Fate's case, the story was written by mangaka Shin Kibayashi. She was simply in charge of trimmering what turned out to be massive novels to a video game format. And why no one talks about this when speaking of Fate stories, I never understood why. To put it shortly, a contribution to this game is different than the one for Engage. And even then, what are you trying to say? That intelligent system should never write stories for their own game ever again? Writers can improve. Don't you're all crazy of Fuka's story when it was written by the people who produced it. It's all been said, so let's begin by what everyone agrees about N-Gage being amazing. The gameplay. The gameplay is so great. This is peak Fire Emblem gameplay. You have everything. Challenging maps, and well designed at that. A competent AI to realize with you. The weapon triangle is back, baby! And so many new features that actually make it more strategically challenging, and it makes it a perfect entry for beginners. For example, the fact that they added a break feature when an enemy with a superior weapon strikes you is a great way of giving stakes to the weapon triangle and to encourage you in trying to use it to your advantage and to watch out for enemies who might do the same. The emblems offer so many combinations for your units, and despite their power, you really have to put all your strategical effort to use them in a way that can break the game, cause the balance is pretty solid. It's not without its flaws, since the health percentage is a
Norian scum!
I mean, even if your units have like 80% chance of hitting, they can miss. But an enemy with 23 chance to hit, they can succeed. At least it makes up for the challenge, I guess. Other than that, I like how the skirmishes are not locked to a level, but are adapted to the level of your current most powerful unit, as it makes each one of them a stimulating challenge, and it helps solving the problem that most free wandering game had, where you could just beat some enemies for grinding and easily break the game. I'm looking at you, Awakening. This time around, grinding is also a challenge, and it may allow the units that are a bit late on train to gain faster XP, since defeating a more powerful enemy allows for that. And each of your units turns out to be a great investment when you train them well enough. And I must say, the Draconic Crystal didn't make things as easier as I feared it would, especially seeing how it was in Fuka. You really have to be careful with your move and how you use it. And the animations for the combat and graphics are amazing. The amount of effort that must have been put into this is breathtaking. They even went as far as changing the accessories of the weapon you use depending on which one you use. That and the weapon design being neat. The critical hits animation.
油断した覚悟いいよおとなしくできる
The changes of expression. The fact that the exploration hub looks exactly like the map to the pixel. And the fact that the NPC on each map depends entirely on whom you fight in the skirmishes surprised me. When you fight Rural Soldier, and that they talk to you about the battles they just experienced, I almost fall off my chair. They really thought about all the details. Bravo, Hayes! The design and art. I am not too sold on most of the Minecraft design, but if you want more thoughts on that, I have a Tumblr post just for you. However, it came to me that people don't know how to phrase critics when it comes to design. Because this art style sucks is different from just design sucks, which is also different from I think this one element in the character design is ruining it. Because I am 1000% sure that when people say Alea will be better off with one hair color only, they are actually trying to say that they don't like the coloring of the hair. And it's instead they say that their design sucks, which no, 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 no. Outfit? Great. High? Great. Hairstyle? Great. Palette? Great. Rendering for the coloring of the hair? Yeah, no, 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 no. It did grow on me a lot, but I still prefer to color it with my own twist. Not saying it's better, but I prefer it like that. But more on that point later. However, I must say, I love the cast outfit design in Engage. They are all great. They even gave a hat to the horse! That's so cute! I think my favorite outfit might be the Griffith Knight or the Wolf Knight. As for the hairstyle, well, I do enjoy Picasso's hat a lot, but I'd love to pierce the bubble of the Asian people have trapped themselves in. Fire Emblem has always been anime! Get a little anime if you want because it was influenced by freaking Gundam! All of the characters in AV4 look like they come from a 19th anime. Yes, I dare to compare Sigurd to Sailor Moon. And Axe looked like a long-distance relative of Girls from Berserk. Not all anime styles look similar. This is literally the art style that is the most popular in Japanese media. It's just that there is different kind of anime art style. What you're all struggling to say isn't Fire Emblem was never anime, but Fire Emblem was never moe. That's Picasso's aesthetic. Moe pop. And with the sole exception of Heroes, it's true that Fire Emblem never featured anyone with that hairstyle. And I can't deny that her hairstyle kinda clashes with the previous one, but it's not like it doesn't work either. The world building. Here it is. Here is the dreadful comparison with Fuka. The Somniel is better. Sorry, Fuka. As I explained in the post-call, the Somniel is better than the monastery. I dwell more on that, but here's the idea. In both Engage and Fuka, you have many things originating from all the continent. But in Fuka, everything is linked to the monastery. Whereas in Engage, it's not. The only thing that is linked to the Somniel is what originates from Lifos in terms of dishes or clothing. And only because the Somniel is part of Lifos. If you want something originating from Fione, you need to unlock said region from Fione first, while keeping in mind that the animals or materials available in, let's say, map of chapter 4 are not available in chapter 5's map, and slightly different than in map 6. The same can be said about the enemies that you fight in the skirmishes, changing from the corrupted to thieves or the royal soldiers. Same can be said about Brodia, Illusion, and so on. And even once you unlock those areas, you still need to make some donation to be able to unlock some of the dishes in the Somniel, some outfit, or to adopt some animals. Therefore, we understand that those are all linked to the different areas of the world it originates from. All the more so when Engage has no New Game Plus. If you replay another file, you will have to do this again. And while it can be a bit tedious, it is giving a real meaning to the exploration phases. It's also giving you the sense that the layer is actually gaining knowledge of the world they live in and are getting used to it, fitting with their own character development of slowly stepping more and more into their role of a divine dragon. Additionally, it has making the Somniel much more tolerable because it gives you a sense of progression. It doesn't feel monotone nor routine-like. You get to visit different landscapes that are moreover beautifully designed, with colorful graphics, meaning you're less likely to feel bored and feel like you're repeating over and over again the same thing. The fact that the more you progress into the story, the more you unlock stuff Even activities linked to one specific character make the Somniel actually meaningful and gives the feeling that Alir is getting used to the world. It's also giving some variety in the Somniel during the playthrough so that at no point it feels boring, while still leaving the possibility to skip entirely the Somniel when you don't want to go back to it. The only cons of this strategy is that it's up to the player to actually seek for the world and do the exploration and donation, but depending on what you want to see on your first playthrough, it actually leaves you the choice. Engage has only 2 chapters of Primera and Alfred explaining the whole world to Alir, and then letting the rest to explore so that the story could focus on its event and let the support dwell more into it as well. There, when you go to the donation maps, you can notice the difference between the different areas during the world exploration phases after a battle. If you try, for example, to adopt an animal, a title screen may appear to tell you that you don't know enough about said animal to adopt it. There, you will have to make some donation to unlock all these region-linked items. This gives the impression that the player is learning more and more about Helios. What I am trying to say is that by showing its world building and letting you explore the world and do all this little stuff, Engage is able to make its world more lively, and it creates an actual dynamic between Alir and the player and Helios, rather than having them stay passive. It's doing what I felt that Fuka failed with its world, giving it life. In fact, it is Somnia that made me realize why I hated the monastery so much. In comparison, this Somnia is closer to what Fates had begun with my castle, making the world feel playable. The exploration phases helps balance the Somniel and make the experience lively. And this realization made me understand why the monastery is such a black sheep through Fuka's narrative. It ruins everything! Especially when not only is it the only place you can visit, but you cannot skip it. And even when you can, make sure the game will punish you for that. The Somniel in comparison is not only very easily skippable, but the fact that it gets more and more feature because of your progression in the story and the world, rather than some Somniel point activities, does convey a progression rhythm that goes along with the flow of the story and makes the exploration phase worth it. Unlike for Garrick Mac, where features depended only on how much you invested into your monastery's activities, for this Somniel, the features rely only on your progression into the world, and this avoids creating a weird break with the pacing of the stories. The lack of New Game Plus in Engage actually respects that every of these features is linked to the world, and it's up to the player to search for them, unlike the monastery, where everything is handed to you, linked to the monastery, and therefore making it that the world of Fodlan fails to come to life. This is giving the game some integrity. And this Somniel actually allows you to take a break from the story to avoid burning out from the game. You don't want to continue the story? You don't want to do skirmishes? Have some silly little game to kill time. Go fish, play with Sumi, speak to your allies, have fun! By the way, I know people complain about the grinding for supports, but I never had the problem personally. I could unlock entire support chains simply by having some allies do the free activities in the Somniel, and that's it. Now back to the main point. Engage has a simpler and smaller world, but the fact that it lets you explore and most importantly interact with the world rather than being locked into the Somniel like Rapunzel and our tower helps it give it life. It breaks the possible monotony of the Somniel by giving variety to your moves. The fact that the Somniel feel itself as you progress into the story is not only fulfilling and giving a sense of progression, but also create a living dynamic. Stuff like food, clothes, or adopting animals seems silly at first, but it gave Engage the same experience as to Sword Hub, where you need to visit the world to appreciate it. This creates a more lively experience and gives actual substance to the world building of Engage, showing this world through letting you explore it, collect items, talk to people who live there, and so on makes it feel alive. It makes it so fun to replay and so agreeable, and it is also allowing for interesting discussions. For example, when I was exploring Destinia's Cathedral after a skirmish, I took some pictures of the altar and noticed that the dragons were different from Sombron's draconic form. And I compared it to 3 other places where there is dragon statues. The Brodian Bridge, the Garden of Lithos Castle, and Gradlon's Temple. And I noticed that Gradlon's Temple is decorated with Sombron's draconic form. That looks nothing like the dragon of Destinia's Cathedral. They looked more similar to the dragon decorating the bridge and the garden. Therefore, I began to think that there was some implication that Elusia used to worship the divine dragons before revering Sombron, and that Sombron took the place of King of the Dragons due to his immense power. And that's just a sample. Really. You also have the support conversations that all add more to this. Just with the entirety of Diamond's support, you can learn pretty much everything about Brodia, about how the war with Elysia began because of the Elysian cult, but in reality it was just a cover by the Brodian nobility to conquer more and more territory, and possibly all of Philios, thing that Diamond heavily dislikes and wish he could put a stop to. This led to the nobility to be wary of him and to send Citrine as a bridge between them and Diamond. But because he already had 2 retainers, she ended up becoming High Priest, leading her to doubt in her own capacities. Remind me why people keep saying that there is no story in Engage. And again, all of this is not new. And except for the World Hub, this was already present within the GBA game, such as Secret Stones. The design, again. Like them or not, there is no denying they communicate information about the country pretty well, and it's easy to know which characters come from which country. And even in doubt, there is still a pattern from their names theme. This is again more like to what Fates did, where the Noyon and Hoshidon faction were very distinct from each other. And so, to illustrate my point, I will focus on one country, Firene.
失礼する。やはり敵襲か。フィレネ王国第一王子アルフレッド。加勢する。
It is canonically introduced as a pacifist country, the wealthiest of the 4 kingdoms and holding philanthropic values, as well as having a pastoral style of life. A kingdom of abundance is it called. I received quite ago an ask that made the clever remark that if all the characters originating from Firene had name derivated from fashion brands, it was actually to show the wealth of Firene. And when you look at the design for the Firenes, they all look incredibly lavish and very designed, even in contrast of the other royals. Alfred and Celine are dressed in Rococo fashion, a European fashion style that is characterized by the elegancy and the extravagance of the design, which is why they feel so over-designed. The palette fits with the theme of A Peaceful Land. Alfred is wearing royal blue and Celine green tone. Besides, Nefeato's outfit doesn't look fitting for battle, actually makes sense with the idea that Firenes dislike war and conflict. Therefore, that they will not be prepared for such situation, as opposed to the Brodian royals, whose design makes sense with the current world they live in. Etienne Boucheron, as well as Chloe and Louis, are no exception. Etier is wearing a tiara and Chloe expensive looking earrings, indicating their wealth. Moreover, they are named after quite expensive fashion brand. What's more, in the Japanese version, all of the members of the Furnace cast, save Alfred, Jean, and Soto Boucheron, speaks a very polite and fancy Japanese. Etier even sounds a bit snobbish. Yes, Etier was changed by the localization. Don't ask me why. This indicates a high level of education and wealth, and all of them are rich. Alfred and Céline, obviously, as royals. Etier is the daughter of a marquis. Same for Chloe. Boucheron is the son of a count. And while Louis holds from more common origins, his polite speech and his outfit for the Somniel and his personality in general seems to infer he was still from quite a wealthy family, and it adds up with how he hails from a town that is famous for the grapes it produces. Mauvais too hails from a wealthy family, and Jean, a commoner, is the son of a doctor and wants to be one. And he can freaking read and afford freaking glasses! While it's likely thanks to his dad had to go through studies to be a doctor. And even in medieval settings, tools were very pricey. So that's telling a lot of how the common people of Pyrenees beneficiate from quite the wealthy style of life. And if you compare the commoner outfit to the noble one available in the Somniel, they aren't that different. And just commoner outfit stands out a lot compared to the Brodion and Solmic one. From that, we can deduce that the peasants in Pyrenees are quite wealthy. And it makes sense since Pyrenees is mainly operating in interior from an economic point of view. It relies a lot on agriculture, and since Pyrenees is a lot of abundance and fertility, you have a lot of land to cultivate. With most of the trade between farmers and merchants being operated in the inside, it creates more wealth for them since the concurrence is so little and mainly between Pyrenees rather than with an exterior country for less pricey products. This explains why there is so many farmers, peasants, and merchants in Pyrenees, and you can expect the people to be quite wealthy, even among commoners. Pyrenees is also described as a never prosperous land, where even in the fall they can benefit from the recalls. The map shows how many territories seems to be perfect for the agricultural activities, and the fact that it mainly provides fruit on the exploration map you visit is also showing this prosperity, as fruits are more expensive than vegetables, and they can cultivate oranges and grapes, fruits mainly developed in the Mediterranean region in real life, indicating a sweet climate. All of those elements are indicators of Pyrenees' economical situation. Now do the same thing for literally every country in this game, and you have it. As for the claim that Picasso knew nothing about the game she was designing for, that's not true, since it is said in the same interview she even got to make some suggestions to fit the settings better. Besides, seeing how some designs such as Lear and Céline changed from the early concept to the current one, it is obvious that Picasso still received some indication when making the designs. In fact, the art direction does a great job at conveying the game's symbolism through a simple visual language, such as the clash of white for the divine dragon against the black for Sombron and his faction. The French names such as Lueur, Lumière, and Sombre, where the two are the hope while the other is the despair, the one when shade, who corrupts and deforms the real nature of things. Zephyria's class name, Melusine, being a reference to European folklore and tying into Zephyria's own motivations. Libération, Alios soul being a symbol of them gaining freedom. The emblem representing the Pantheon Fire Emblem and a state of apotheosis, and so on and so on and so on. The music. The music in Engage is a special case, as each country got one composer assigned to it and tasked with making the soundtrack, which explains why, other than the style, it feels so varied. Fearless theme is more like to a classic RPG with Celtic vibes. Rodia's music is a mild and dynamic one. Lucian's music sounds dignified and mysterious. Song's music has Oriental vibes with a dynamic rhythm, and it perfectly fits the settings. And the music also reflects Engage symbolism perfectly. An example of that is the Hounds theme. The Hounds are all named after colors. Zephyr, sepia. Gris, gris. Marnie, marron. Mauvier, mauve. Grey, brown, and purple are the three colors that create the color of sepia. The symbolic within the name is indicating of the hounds being united. However, the music seems to disagree, as the theme is very cacophonic, yet still forms an harmony, with many sounds mixing together in a polyphonic way, creating a disharmonious melody that is still forming a whole, representing how they are a group of four, a family, but a toxic one, where each one of them is entitled to themselves, preventing them from being a real family, as what ended up destroying the hounds aren't just Zephyr's actions, but their incapacity to harmonize themselves with each other, despite their name indicating their possibility on paper to be united. Another example is the opening. As for every game, Engage uses some part of its main theme/opening in its main soundtrack. But the main theme beneficiates from a lot of musical variety from within the composition, and therefore the use of some parts can be very easy to spot. In the case of Lear, what is used the most is this part of the opening. This part of the opening, mainly played on piano or organ or any instrument of the sort, is conferring a feeling of softness. But the more the music progresses, the more the notes accumulate, imitating the movement of the light falling, accumulating slowly, the movement of the glow that gains in intensity until it becomes a bright burning light. This reflects Alia's own arc, as their Japanese name, lure, means glow. Alia's name has the symbolic of being a lure of hope, a theme constantly explored in Engage. I could go on and on about the music of Engage, as it's so amazing. No, seriously, there is so many bangers in it. I have a lot of points to make, so bear with me as we are now discussing something that is largely enjoyed. The characters. While people accuse them of being nothing but tropes, let me break once again the bubble of delusion you created for yourself. All of Fire Emblem's characters are based on anime tropes. That's even why we call them archetypes. And yes, Fuka too. I mean, come on, we all know it begins like this. Marianne is the quiet one, Hilda is the lazy one, Raphael is the imbo that likes to eat, Caspar is the over-energetic one, Felix is the hedgy snowman, Sylvain is the flirt, Linhart is the sleepy guy, Sophia is the young prodigy that hates being treated like a child, and Bernadetta is the one that this game hates with all its might.
After that, it was just constant scolding. He couldn't say 2 words to me without mentioning how useless I was. An unmarriageable girl.
Crosses the line, Professor! Singing? Me? Why would I be singing? I'd never be singing! I've never been so humiliated! Useless, worthless, unmarriageable! Idiot! Hopeless! Waste of charm! Just burn the whole thing, Bernie! Break your stupid brushes and never paint again!
Bernie. But like any character in this entire franchise, the support conversation allows to know them better and learn about who they are. and that there is more to them than their gimmick. Same thing with Engage. You have plenty of amazing characters. Alfred, Diamant, Vale, Hortensia, Alchrist, Celine, etc. etc. I won't speak too much about this to encourage you to go with their support, but there is some of the most wholesome support in the entire franchise. From Diamant, Etienne and Alfred, Pandreo and Panette, Vander and Pandreo, Alfred and Celine, Alchrist and Celine, any of Hortensia and Vale's support with any unit, and the entirety of the DLC cast support, with special mention for Madeline and Gregory, and Rofo and Alia's support. Heal my depression forever. And another bubble to pop up about the people who complain that the C support detracts from the interesting one. It has been like this for the entire franchise! Lucifer and Byless C support is literally Ivy and Diamant C support. And if you go, well, Path of Radiance didn't do that. It included all characters to the plot. Engage was not trying to be Path of Radiance, but to follow the same pattern as the GBA and DS game, as the devs stated. So this argument is irrelevant. You can't complain that a media isn't doing something it isn't trying to do. Anyway, one of the strongest aspects of Engage is that even characters that don't have a support conversation can get a lot of depth from small things. An example of this with King Marion, I don't need endless support conversation to get an idea of who he is. Just the few interactions he had with Lear, his sons, and how his sons describe him is enough to get the idea. As Alfred explained, he is a good father to his son. He is supportive of them to the point he went to salute Alchrist despite Diamant's protestation. So he does love his sons deeply. And the love that Diamant and Alchrist expressed towards him in chapter 10, and during the special dialogue, would you use one of the Brodian to defeat him, is enough to see how much of a good father he was to them. However, King Marion has one big flaw. He is eager to fight. This can be seen very early. The moment he meets Lear, right after talking a little, he tries to challenge them in catching Roy's ring, like a little kid would do. And later, he expresses his curiosity on whether Lear can turn into a dragon, excited by the idea of fighting one. All of this shows that he is one who enjoys the fight, and since he is pretty ambitious as well, it is easy to deduce that the nobility is exploiting this side of him in order to lead Brodia to war so that they can gain profit from it. Engaged characters might be one of the most stellar cast of this franchise, along with the Fuka one, and tons of them are enjoyable and memorable. And now, the big divisive element. The story. It's good. No, really, it is genuinely good. Not saying it's a masterpiece or anything, but the writing is pretty competent and solid, even if a bit clumsy in the execution of some stuff. This is a pretty simple story about going on a journey to find yourself and becoming the person whom you want to be through the connection that you have with others, in a collarbone of defeating the evil dragon and missing a bit of whole evil story's element. But while it's not trying to be a complex story, it still manages to add a lot of depth thanks to its message, theme, and characters. It might have a bit of a mechanical pacing where Lear meets one character, get a ring, or fight for a ring, and repeat until chapter 17. But this also allows for a lot of parallelism since there is a bit of subtlety in this scenario. We meet Alfred and then Celine and her retainers. We meet Earl Chris fighting Hortensia and then joining Diamond in his fight with Ivy. From there we follow the pattern with Soul, where we meet Fogado and then Chimera. The main objective being all about Sombron. This allows the plot to be straightforward and focus on its goal. It's not trying to be a complex story, but this little story feels like watching a special anniversary Fire Emblem anime, a lot of vanilla shonen vibes to it. It does take itself seriously, but clearly not as much as the previous entries, as it has straight up ha 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 laugh moment in the plot, such as
やはり驚きますよね。急に声をおかけしてごめんなさい。
ヤッピー、助けが現れましたぞ。
or
すみませんでした。
or
俺はここトゥーラ砂漠の平和を守る自警団長フォガートさ。自警団たるもの悩める人の力になるべし。何かお困りなら力になるよ。
助かります。私はリトスの地より参りました。神竜です。
神竜？神竜って信仰対象の？本当に？
はい。
すみません、無礼な態度で話しかけてしまい。
in fact, and I say that as seriously and naturally as possible, it takes itself as seriously as Super Sentai. You laugh, but it's true. It's the exact same tone as to Transformers shonen shows. In fact, the Engage manga has the exact same tone too, albeit a bit darker and sillier. It's the traditional Fire Emblem, but more light-hearted. It's not trying to hold any promise it can't fulfill. It knows what it is, and it sticks with it. It's trying to be a simple story about a hero's journey with a rather cheesy tone, and it is what it is. At least on first playthrough. It is my 5th playthrough, and if I count all the times I went checking Engage story and all the posts I made about it from February, keeping in mind that this game story is at most over 7 hours long, it means that I spend tell ya, this game is actually much darker than you'd thought. Oh boy, this game is let's just say I have my reason to call it Fire Emblem emotional damage. The amount of foreshadowing in this game is literally insane!
その瞳、とっても綺麗な色ね。
From earlier being a fair dragon, to then turning into an emblem, to the Hound's backstory, with Sombron coming from another world twist, really, this game is showing that it perfectly knew how it wanted its story to end. Which is why a lot of those twists actually works. They do not ruin the flow of the story one little bit. Despite some pacing issues, its flow is very natural and the plot moves forward in a pretty straightforward manner. No filler arc, no unnecessary moment. And I will point out later some great moments it has. All I can say is that it did a great job at delivering the story it is trying to tell. And also, I saw some people saying the story refused to commit to anything, but I kind of disagree. I mean, yeah, in chapter 10, even if you lose all the rings, you will get them back eventually, but do you get any of the rings that you lost? No. Not until chapter 17. And a lot of people complained that this home hack was very painful, and I'm pretty sure it's the reason why we have some more emblems in the DLC. All the rings gathered from there are essentially rings that your party didn't have. And when you eventually get all the rings finally reunited, what happens? That's right! But then you come back to life and use all the rings to defeat the villain. So surely the stakes are all gone, right? We should talk more about the fact that Engage has a freaking bad ending. Let's move on. The villains. Honestly, Engage is probably a return to actually good villains. And it was refreshing to see characters such as Veil, Stormborn, and the Hound. Especially after their girlfriends! They aren't redeemable or sympathetic characters, except for Movier and Marnie and Veil, but they are quite endearing in a way, mainly because they are fun characters, a little like Jessie and James from Pokemon, but more messed up. The fact that the plot isn't trying to oversell the Hound or Hyacinth and instead makes someone appear as the real threat is actually great. They are just presented as minions and they are actual competent villains, doing a great job at being thorns in others' path. After all, Hyacinth managed to revive Sombron and to kill Morion. Zephyr and the Hounds are terrifying enemies with the emblems on, and they did manage to seal the rings, even if they end up losing them as the game progresses. But I can appreciate the fact that when they fail, they acknowledge it and that there is consequences for them. Veil is honestly a case of mind control done right in my opinion, as it is well developed and is taken into her own character development. But let's be honest, everything about Veil is well done. As for the Hounds and Stormborn, a common criticism is that their backstory was thrown in the hand without real development, and that's not very true. There's actually some foreshadowing about this, but it's probably too subtle for someone to notice it on first playthrough. But I think those last moments are full of enough information to make them more than one noted villain. They are much more deeper than you would give them credit for. Really. Moreover, the Four Wings offer a great insight. They help put their characters in perspective and showing how having lived a different life would have saved them. With many of their backstories being very different just to show that the Hounds are characters at the extreme opposite the message about overcoming your past as they are trapped in it. But they do fall the be what you want to be message by showing the dark side of the coin. So now, I will illustrate several instances of engaged writing. But first, I'd like to clarify something about people saying Engage is doing the opposite of show don't tell. And that is that a dialogue isn't necessarily a tell don't show. Keep in mind that show don't tell is a literary technique that wasn't practiced until a long moment, mainly because there were things people weren't allowed to show. In the 17th century, in France, theatrical performance didn't allow people to show someone die, nor any violence on that matter, so what did they do? exposition. Yep, you heard me right. However, when it comes to the use of language, the more you use an image language, metaphor and allegory, the more you're showing through language. Because telling can be a way of showing. In fact, back then the challenger writers was to be able to show as efficiently as the painter, using only words, and it did stir out emotions. So, basically to see how a dialogue can show, it entirely depends on several things. What is said and how it is said. An example of that with Fire Emblem. Sequence Stone's GBO game couldn't show Monika's body. It had to rely on the absolute state of horror of the Rene twins upon seeing the body to get the point across. A reaction that was expressed through words. Through a frame and Erika's incapacity to speak, we can imagine the horror they had to see, to the point this scene is considered the most terrifying moment in Fire Emblem's history. No music, no voice acting, no portraits changing expressions, no cutscene showing Monika. Just Ephraim and Erika trying to articulate a proper sentence is enough to show the horror they felt upon seeing Monika. Another example, in Fate. Corrin have 3 different supports with Azura depending on the kingdom they choose. And in the North support, this support, despite relying on 0 voice acting, on static illustration and just on dialogue, did a great job at showing Corrin's guilt over choosing no. The support starts with Corrin breaking glass, as indicated by the noise of breaking glass, and them trying to clear out the mess. Azura arrives. She gives them some water and comments on how pale they are and on how they are trembling, leading Corrin to talk about how guilty they feel towards the Hoshidan soldier they had to kill. This support uses mostly Azura's dialogue to show Corrin's reaction. Through her description, the broken glass, and Corrin's cue, we can see that Corrin is indeed perturbed. That is something that can be done using telling as a form of showing. And another one. In Fuka, when Byleth unlocked their sea support with Edelgard, their support begins with Edelgard moaning in her slumber, calling out for her father in a state of absolute horror, to the point that Byleth and Sophis thought that there was a ghost.
Bob! Save!
Since it's taking place at night and by the phrasing alone, this scene is already showing Edelgard is having a nightmare, and thus, long before she even tells us that. So, now that it is said, let's take an example of the story foreshadowing one of the villain's backstory. My example for this is Marnie. I think her backstory shared in chapter 18 does a great job at explaining why she is obsessed with praise and why she speaks like a young boy. Yep, you heard me right.
マロン王族揃いって聞いてたんだけど君たち僕らより
In the Japanese version, Marnie speaks in katakana and refers to herself as Boku. Katakana is one of the 3 Japanese alphabets along with kanji in hiragana. And katakana in anime is often used by teenagers. For example, Hortensia speaks in katakana too. This is to signify that Marnie is young, and in contrast with Madeline, who speaks using kanji, it reinforces her immaturity and bratty style. As for Boku, it is the pronoun I in Japanese, used generally by men, rarely for women. It is semi-formal, which means people often avoid using it in front of strangers, as it translates as being very casual with someone. And that's why Alfred is using it. Marine uses it too, in order to sound cool and fit her aesthetic. But Mani doesn't really seem tomboyish or rather girly hammer. So, when she explains that her mother preferred her brother over her, it all makes sense. Mani is emulating her brother's speeches. Not that she doesn't accept being a girl, but because she thought that her mother would like her more if she was more like her brother. This is further confirmed by the fact that Madeline does not speak like that, but simply uses the default pronouns watashi, gender neutral, and speaks very politely as opposed to Mani.
わあ僕そっくりの子でも僕より弱そうこんなやつすぐ倒してまた褒めてもらおうっとこの世界の私は神竜様の敵でしたかしかし私にしては刹那的な考え方をしますね評価を他者に委ねると苦しいだけですよはあお説教鬱陶しいんだけど僕が君より強そうだから羨ましいのええ羨ましいですよモーブが近くにいるあなたが涙が出そうなほど隣にいる時間をどうか大切にしてください
Since Madeline had different childhood because her parents are not the doubles of Mani's parents, it all adds up. This showed that Mani never really recovered from the scar left by her mother neglecting her, since she still speaks like that to this day. And seeing how Zephyr and the followers of Sombron keep on feeding her praise addiction, maintaining her trapped in the past, it's no surprise. So when she heard that Veil was actually like her, someone was just seeking for her parents to acknowledge her, she was able to empathize as someone who is still not over it. This little kind of writing is very current in Engage. In Veil's case, her and her other self also speaks differently. Other than the tone, regular Veil speaks in a childish and cutesy manner, using conjunction and expression trying to convey her innocence and her rather childish nature. Whereas, her other self speaks in a very arrogant way, using the Matsudesu conjunction to sound mature, refined, and prideful. Almost as if she was a female equivalent of Sombron or emulating Zephyr. But that's just for the phonetics. Scripturally speaking, Veil and other Veil use different alphabets. Regular Veil speaks in Hiragana, one of the 3 alphabets. Hiragana is an alphabet that people who begin to learn Japanese learn first, therefore it's considered to be for children. And in Engage, the children characters such as Jean and Anna do use Hiragana. In the fake Xenologue as well, young Nell and Neil use Hiragana.
僕はどうして父上やお姉ちゃんみたいに大きな竜になれないの
いる泣かないで
僕が出来損ないだから強くないから
However, Adult Nell and Ruffle pretending to be Neil are both using kanji.
すごく優しくていい人だから僕は神竜様のこと好きだよ
It is likely that Veil using Hiragana and a mix of kanji for some words easier to convey once again her innocence. Other Veil, however, is speaking only in kanji.
私はベイル
自己紹介がまだでしたね私はソンブルの娘にして邪竜族の第一王女ベイルと申します以後お見知り
Therefore, when in chapter 10, Alair realizes that the hooded figure is Veil, they are shocked by the difference in their speeches as they behave entirely differently. As for the player, due to this peculiarity, when the hooded girl speaks, neither the readable dialogue nor the audible one can prepare you for the twist. And that's because Veil and other Veil speech are polar opposite.
いつの間に。無事で済まないのはあなたの方です。
Another example is Ruffle. When he's Neil, he refers to himself using Boku and using cutesy expression to convey Neil's kind nature.
わかった。了解、神竜様。よーし。いるかよ。
However, when he switches to Ruffle, he uses ware, waga, ga, an archaic pronoun that is here to convey Ruffle's arrogance and that is rather full of himself.
ってやる。了解だ神竜。うまく使え。ラファールだ。
That, coupled by his speech, his manners, and the conjunction he is using, make it obvious that he is emulating Sombron, as he is literally speaking like him. Sombron too uses ware, waga, ga, and the exact same conjunction. This is another way of showing Ruffle is influenced by Sombron, and I mean it in literally every possible way. More on that on the Tumblr post dedicated to them. Now, an occasion to show engaged speak writing. Occasion to show engaged speak writing. Talking about the hero of the game, Alir. At first I was kind of skeptical about Alir, especially because of their hair color, so now, how do I feel about Alir? You ever love a fiction character so much you will want to eat bricks for them? I love them. They are my favorite character of this game and one of my favorite Fire Emblem characters of all time. They are such a sweet character. They are nice, kind, warm, polite, humble, modest, caring, sweet, a scared cat, friendly, they have PTSD. And most importantly, they are absolutely normal. People were complaining that they are a divine dragon so that it makes them unrelatable, and I disagree. It's like those people who say they can't relate to someone if they are on the same gender or same skin color as them. Alir is a relatable protagonist simply because they react like literally anyone would if they were thrown suddenly in the middle of a bitter war when they are amnesiac and just woke up from coma. They don't want to fight at first. They can't manage their first fight in chapter 1 and 3 alone. Their fear of dying and losing those that they love, the fact that they'd rather have a normal life than having to put up with all those fights, and the pressure of being a divine dragon, all of this is relatable. The fact that they make mistakes and get angry or sad when their enemy is winning, or that they face people dying in front of them, all of this is how a normal person would feel. Their character arc of journeying to save the world being the occasion for them to find themselves and connect with other people reminding me a lot of Rose from Pandora Hearts. Both are thrown into adventures without having real motivations on their own, but they end up developing their own wish, and at the end of their journey, they finally find an answer as to who they are. I also disagree with the Alir is a divine dragon only so that the player can get worshipped thing, because of several things. Japanese people and Asia in general don't really have the same vision of the self as the West, and that's mainly due to the influence Buddhism has on those countries. I'll link you to a video about Persona that deals with that topic, but basically here's the idea. Asian people don't really see self-insert as the same way Westerners do because they don't see the self in the same way. They see it more as irrelational and a collectivist notion. Therefore, it's likely that what we perceive as shameless pandering to the player is actually not seen as the same thing by a Japanese audience. However, Buddhism in Engage does play a bigger part in the narrative than simply explaining that the self is seen differently in the West. In Buddhism, existing is suffering, living is suffering, and that suffering mainly comes from an attachment to the ego, which indulges itself into things that are transient when it is transient itself. So, rather than being obsessed with your own happiness and your own self, you should try to detach yourself from your ego to liberate it. Because existing is suffering and that everything is transient, we should all support each other and go through life in harmony. Those notions are the reason why the power of friendship is such a topos in Japanese media, as it is in the very root of this concept and at the core of the collectivist values that is embraced in Asia. And it's one of the many Buddhist references Engage has. From earlier several revivals being in reality reminiscent of the samsara, to liberation being also a reference to nirvana, with the emblem of Furibond / Fire Emblem being the state of enlightenment apotheosis, and the fact that the Helios map in the cutscene of Chapter 2 is strangely reminiscent of the Baba Chakra and Alia's own character arc. This Buddhist aspect plays into how Alir was able to embrace the idea that it is through connection that you can actually achieve your dream and fulfilling yourself into the person you want to be, as opposed to someone who fall into the traps of egoism and the poison of hatred, which is symbolized by the snake. That said, what we call avatar worship is surprisingly plot relevant and film relevant in Engage. I'll spare you the big details that you can check here. That the fact that people love the Lear only because they are the divine dragon and then came to love them for who they are and thus accepting that they are a fair dragon ties perfectly within the film. And when it comes to Alir's character arc, it seems people kind of misunderstand it, and by that I mean a lot. Alir's character arc isn't I want to be a divine dragon. Nope. No. Alir doesn't hate their nature. In fact, they showed they accepted their nature as a fair dragon pretty well. This is visible in Alir and Vei's support. And should Alir give the pact ring to one of the Fell twins, they will show that they are pretty chill about being a fair dragon. Alir doesn't hate being one, unlike Vei. No, what they dislike is what they associate to being a fair dragon. Because in chapter 20, the reason why they were so shocked is because they thought that being a fair dragon would be an obstacle to their dream of being a hero that saved the world. That is Alia's character arc, from the beginning of the story to the end, becoming a hero that saved the world. It says a lot that even Fire Emblem Heroes, notoriously famous for the character assassination, was able to get that right. I don't want to dwell too much into this since I really want to talk about more stuff about Alir, but I will simply present the peak writing moment of Engage. Yes, past Alir. Oh boy, this one moment is so good. That's kind of a pity that it takes place in chapter 24. So here we go. Alia's speech in the Japanese version is a bit particular. They use kanji and speak in a very polite manner that is meant to convey their kind and sweet demeanor. Pastor Lee used the same speech, with the difference that Dick speaks entirely in hiragana. So, when Pastor Lee talks about their dead siblings, something more twisted about this occurs. At first we are struck by the violence of the death of Lee's siblings, but then when you pause and dissect the scene, it manages to get more messed up.
お兄様は水につけられて死にました。お姉様は炎に焼かれて死にました。可愛かった妹や弟は異形兵に襲われて死にました。戦争で死んだ兄弟たちもいますが。
The fact that Ali is able to precise how each of the siblings died is showing something. They were there when it happened. It happened right in front of their eyes. Their older brother being drowned, their older sister being burned, their younger siblings being ripped apart by the corrupted, the dead bodies of their siblings dead in the war and thrown to be food to the corrupted. They saw it all. Now, about the delivery. If you recall Fulka, when Lucifer and Edelgard shared the backstory, the text clearly indicates that they are getting emotional. That is not the case with Pastelier. Even though they call their younger sibling cute, they say it in such a way that it seems like they can't feel anything anymore about it. And this contrasts a lot to how Lear was barely capable of talking about Lumera without feeling they will break out and cry. And in comparison to Coronto Lear, who speaks rather naturally, Pastor Lear's speech feels very on the nose. There is no subtext to be had or rather little. Their cue is dry, cold, simple, robotic. And that is showing how broken Lear is. The fact that they can't emote anymore and speak so coldly show the psychological damage they suffered. And that is not all, because Pastor speaks like a child. They use hiragana, which means that they have the same alphabet as a 10-year-old child. Note though that while Anna, Jean and Vale still use some kanji, Pastor Lee speaks entirely in hiragana, which not only reinforces this childish feeling, but even implies that they got broken when they were very, very young, and that their speeches reflect that their mind is frozen to that young age. This, coupled by the robotic delivery of their line and the emotionless tone, creates a very unsettling feeling, to say the least. And another thing about hiragana is that the reason why people begin to learn this alphabet is because it is less polysemical than kanji. So, this means that Pastor Lear's speech feels even more devoid of emotion and has very little subtext. Moreover, Alia's politeness is no longer seen as politeness. In their past state, it is a sign of their oppressed mindset. Their politeness is cold as opposed to Alia's warm politeness, and it is here to show that they talk and behave like a tool. And all of what I said offer an incredible contrast to that one side of Postolier that is shown in the cutscene of chapter 22. In chapter 22, a cutscene that already played twice is now playing, because this scene and this scene are actually this scene, but portrayed differently. In the prologue, it is portrayed as a dream, what Lear would have wished had happened that day. In chapter 3, it is out of context. But the fact that they saw themselves as having an evil smile is showing what will be seen through who. That Lear bears guilt for that time of their life, and that is why they still retain some negative feeling to their fell nature. Unlike Veil, who hates anything reminding her that she is a dragon, Lear associates the bad deeds to being a fey dragon. They aren't bothered by it as long as they can be helpful to others. But the moment that their conditions lead them to harm others, they are horrified by it. Hence, their reaction to being trapped in their own body as a Fell Emblem in the bad ending. It is being back into their past selves, as the emblem in the Fell version are very alike to Postelier. Unable to think, deprived of their free will, mere tools used by Stormborn to make others suffer. This cutscene where Lear dies is actually full of information about how much Lumera meant to them. The bright innocent smile, the sweet tone, the fact that their eyes are sparkling, the contrast is immediate. In front of Lumera, Ali is what they were inside. An innocent child forced into a life that is not for them and would eventually break them entirely. A kind soul that wished no harms on others and was forced into this way by fear. The fear of dying. This one scene is enough to show how much Lear loves Lumera and how much she meant to them. She was the one who inspired them and gave them the courage to defeat their own father. The one that gave them love and kindness. The one that broke their solitude, that gave them a purpose in life and inspired them into becoming a righteous dragon. This one scene is enough. And while I am no big fan of how chapter 24 was executed, I can give it credit for 1. Giving Lear an opportunity to see themselves without having to go through remembering everything. Because while I'd be down to see how Lear would react if they regained their memory, I still think this would probably break them. I mean...
欠陥品欠陥品欠陥品欠陥品欠陥
Yeah. 2. To give an incredible perspective on Lear's fear of the corrupted. It is not mere fear, it is actually a real trauma. Since Lear's amnesia seems to be a post-traumatic amnesia, the fact that the corrupted triggers them is impressive. I see a lot of people complain that past chapter 1 is never explored again, and I disagree. Compared to the manga, whom everyone seems to agree is better than the game, Ali is being much more of a coward in the game. In the manga, Ali is subjected to a PTSD crisis that makes him almost faint, and he is forced to retreat by the Prius of Lithos, even though he actually wants to help, and he managed to break from this, to help a little girl, saying that there is no way he will run away. In the game, Ali's reaction is less strong, but they are the one who orders to run away and wants to flee from there. It seems they are frozen in place, and that is the reason why they can't run away. This happened in the scene where you meet Lumera.
まだこんなに今度は竜まで
When Veil attacked them in chapter 3, and when in chapter 4, a corrupted attacked them. They are clearly incapable of moving, which fits with what they said in their support with Diamond.
It came out of nowhere. I just started running. I'm not really good with the corrupted. It's different on the battlefield.
I can spot them first, then steel myself before engaging.
In their bond with Tiki, they mentioned how they make nightmare when meeting the corrupted. However, all the dreams that he had so far are actually memories. This indicates that the corrupted is one of their triggers. And not only do you learn why they hate them so much, but also notice a nice parallel. Now let's focus on the corrupted more closely. In the Japanese version, they are called Igyohei, deformed soldier, because of how their corrupted state disfigures them, and that they end up looking like broken people with a black mask, as Alfred described them. Now, the fact that they are deformed shows how being revived by a fair dragon robs people of their true nature to turn them into something deformed, twisted from their original shape. Which is why, even when they are brought back in a metabout way, they still feel unsettling to others. Despite being trapped in such a body for a short time, O'Leary was still the same person as we knew. They weren't corrupted of their true essence. However, post-O'Leary, despite being alive, as they point out, are like the corrupted. They are deformed, deprived of their true nature, of the person they want to be. The fact that O'Leary is the child of Sombre shows that they are a weak light and trapped in the darkness, and are surely to extinguish. They are deformed, mentally speaking. They are corrupted, and thus it explains why O'Leary seems to have some self-love against their past selves, before meeting said past self and realizing that in reality they were just a scared child. And all of this is already foreshadowed in one moment that is actually pretty well thought. Lumera's first death. So this time I will read one of my posts dedicated to Lumera's death. I think we can all agree that this scene got way too long, even if I can understand why. However, I think people misunderstand why it is long, and why there is so many dialogue in this one scene.
母さん、ずっとあなたに会いたかったのよ。
あなたが母親？
どうしたの？まさかあなた。
This is the meeting between O'Leary and Lumera. Lumera calls herself Ka-san, mother. However, when asking the question, O'Leary says Hahaoya, mother. While the two means the same thing, there is some nuance in Japanese, with Hahaoya being more polite and formal and less of a title than Ka-san, which is a casual way of saying mother, mom. And seeing how upon waking up O'Leary immediately used the formal suffix san when talking to Vander for the first time, it's probably a mark of reflexive politeness on O'Leary's part. However, Lumera calling herself Ka-san isn't just to show her love for O'Leary or their closeness. It's how O'Leary used to call her in the past, and eventually does after her death.
一人で
やりました、母さん。
So when O'Leary called her Hahaoya, it immediately triggered Lumera's attention, because the separation made it even more obvious that O'Leary forgot about her. Especially as in Japanese dialogue, when asking a question, characters often repeat the word that the previous speaker just uttered, like an echo. So you would expect O'Leary to ask, あなたが母さん rather than あなたが母親 O'Leary using Hahaoya is translating into their complete loss of familiarity towards Lumera. It's additionally tying to post-O'Leary's polite tone, where it's not genuine politeness, but being very immediate, almost reflexive, and an automatism. Normally, seeing how polite they are, I'd expect them to call Lumera Okasama, which is more formal. For example, Corinne does that with Mikoto, and in engaged case, Lee calls someone Oto-sama. I think Alia calling Lumera Kasan is meant to show how much Alia loves her. To the point, they call her in a very much casual way compared to how Post-Alia call their other family member. When referring to their dead siblings in chapter 24, allies call their brother Oni-sama and their sister One-sama, using more polite and formal honorifics than with Lumera, which could make sense at first, seeing how polite they are, but the explanation is different. As for their mother, they call her Okasama. Freaking Okasama! Even their own biological mother. But Lumera, their adopted mother, they call her Kasan. I think it's showing how much Alia loves her, and the fact that their connection is even stronger than blood. We have a little Alia, whose politeness at the time is due to only being treated like a tool and acting as such, but with Lumera, they act so casual. This line alone is the only argument required about how Engaged story also included that family is based on connection through bonds rather than blood. Now, it's important to point it out, but during the entirety of this chapter, Alia doesn't call her mother once. The first time they call her mother is during a death scene. In this dialogue, Lumera is saying haha instead of Kasan, whereas Alia called her Kasan. This creates a parallel to this scene with the role reversed. Now, the interesting bit is that Alia ended up screaming Kasan despite their memory loss and their initial reflexive politeness toward Lumera, showing a hint of subconscious memory. You know, those things that feels very familiar to Lee, and in general, they feel this more toward things related to the third world, but in this case, they end up feeling this toward Lumera because of that one cutscene in chapter 22. Lumera, luckily at the time, is dying in Lifo's castle. This is a familiar scenario, but with the role reversed. Instead of Lumera holding a dying Alia, it's Alia who is holding a dying Lumera. And this is even more explicit at the moment where Alia begins to cry again. They switch to hiragana.
私も母さんの子で幸せです。1000年前の私も幸せだったと思います。だからお願い、思い出すまでそばにいて、まだ行かないでよ。
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, current Alia speaks in kanji, past Alia is the one speaking in hiragana. Alia switching at that very moment to hiragana is showing that their body remembers something that their mind don't, as they end up speaking just like they used to in the past, using the same alphabet as a small child. Also, I played with female Alia, and at the beginning of the game, she speaks with a more high-pitched voice compared to the later game, sounding much more childish as a result, making the immediate politeness seem even more like a mechanism. And in this scene, it's a striking parallel to the cutscene of chapter 22, as Alia speaks with the exact same tone as their opposed selves in that very scene. So, when the scene switches to Hiragana, it makes it like the same scene replays with the role reversed, as if Alire remembered what happened despite it being subconscious. And when Alire and Lumera makes the pinky promise and that Lumera's finger ends up falling, Alire say this.
おしゃべりを一緒に
母さん
Alire say Kasan in Hiragana before switching back to kanji. This happens in chapter 25-2, where the last word that Alire will say in Hiragana will also be Kasan, creating a parallel to that scene.
母さん
This scene is doing an amazing job at justifying Alire's tears, even before we learn about how much Lumera meant to them, because it's showing how they actually remember something, even if their mind is still unable to recognize it. The actual reason why there is so much dialogue in this scene wasn't to try to gaslight you into feeling things for Lumera. It was to prepare what's coming next. And also, a lot of Japanese players pointed out that in their first playthrough, they did not notice that subtle change, but that in their second playthrough, they did. And even more clever, the use of the camera. I know we all love to make fun of Alire's hair, but here, the switching between their different profiles from the camera is so clever, because when Alire switches back to Hiragana, the camera is focusing on the dominant thread of her hair, making it feel like she actually remembers what happened. In fact, display with the camera is a constant, where Alire's hair and eyes are used in such a way that while depending on the gender you choose, it mostly shows that Alire's nature relies on their mixed origin. With Melalire, a scene like the miracle can be seen as the blue, divine side being incomplete due to the red streak. But as he reaches for the ring, he finally is complete. While with the Melalire, it is the first side that began to turn divine through the blue streak, and again, when she reaches for the rings, she finally is complete. Despite their hair color being swapped, the fact it is so irregular always is reminiscent of Alire's nature. They aren't complete. The two, the fell and the divine, have to intertwine between each other for Alire to be who they are. They are never complete on one side or another. They are both. And it's a nice callback to how Lumera and Sombron's draconic form are embraced in the map of chapter 2. And believe it or not, it's not over, but I don't want this video to turn into an Alire analysis, sadly. So, I'll direct you to the numerous posts I wrote about them. And finally, the one thing that makes Engage amazing. The Somni. I want an Engage too, so I can run with it in my hands in the Somni. I love it so much, they're so cute. Engage does have its flaw though. Some scenes are a bit weak for the emotional impact they are supposed to leave. Some scenes are too long. The main story rushes the characters too much. The models not moving off the pacing. The localization had some shenanigans. There are still some design that fails to communicate proper information, but you can check all of that in the post called Engage Review Part 9, But if you feel like I contradict myself, it's normal. A lot of time passed since I did those, and my opinion on a lot of things changed a lot. And I won't talk about it since this video was meant to focus on the positive. You could hang that the highlights I choose in this video are just some example of well-written moments in a flow story. But when those moments keep on multiplying, you can't act any longer as if Engage was a flawed product with some redeeming quality, but that it is simply a good product with some flaws. And now, among the comparison with Fuka. As I explained, the devs were clear on the fact that they didn't want Engage to be like it, but a polar opposite, and that's no wonder. Fuka is way too far from what he habitually makes. Besides, I think this confirms something that a lot of blogs and fans, even though they still talk about Fuka, have noticed. That he doesn't really believe in the Fuka vision. Think about it. Even though Fuka didn't sold any of the 4 million copies yet, even though it did not got the chance to prove itself yet, they still choose to do a game that's the polar opposite. Why, in your opinion? I see it as a confession that he wasn't really a big fan of the Fuka direction, and seeing how Engage is closer to what Intelligent System habitually makes and enters as following the same direction as the franchise has been following ever since the GBA game, I think I'm right on this one. Regardless, this not only means that any of the complaint that it is not Three Houses is irrelevant, but that any wish such as, if only we could have a game that has engaged gameplay and Fuka story, is probably bound to meet disappointment. I will conclude by saying this. All of this is what makes Fire Emblem Engage an unforgettable experience, with every replay being funnier than the first one, and it shows that the devs put a lot of love in this game. It's truly a love letter to the franchise, and frankly, I can't help but think it is unfair that so many people accuse the devs of not having put any effort or care into this project just because they didn't like it. Were you there when he's developed Engage? Were you working with them? So, on what ground do you think you have the right to say that they didn't put any effort into this game? Because if there's one thing you can't say about Intelligent System, is that they don't care about the games they make. Awakening was the last game, and they put every of their last resources into it to give the franchise a great ending. But when Awakening managed to sell enough for them to keep on making games, they still took the critics against it into account when making Fate, which is why they hired a literal mangaka to write the script of Fate. Even Book 7, the most convoluted story ever written by is nothing but an attempt at making a complex story. I don't think I ever played any of their games without feeling that at least they tried. In Engage's case too, they put everything they had. They even have a moment where Lumira breaks the fourth wall to wish an happy birthday to the franchise. And to the fans, a big thank you. Thank you for having put up with all of this and staying with us until now.
約束していたの、眠る前のあなたと。次のお誕生日にあなたに似合う素敵なものをプレゼントする約束。いつかあなたのお誕生日に渡そうと思って。お誕生日おめでとう。
The fact that they put so much into this game is a proof of their goodwill. That Komuro didn't care about the story she was tasked to write is false. The gameplay might have been the focus, but that's not the reason why you would see the story as not having received as much care, because it did. The sole fact that they took into account each of the characters' speech shows the care for the characters and the story. Never ever claimed again that a game or any media felt lazy just because you didn't vibe to it. I am aware this story is very generic. I can understand not liking it, nor how it was handled. But the endless by faith criticism this game receives makes it impossible for anyone to take those critics seriously. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little trip with me. Thank you for staying until the end. I hope that if you loved Engage, you will love it even more, and that if you haven't tried it out yet, you will give it a chance, and that this video brought as much light to your day as earlier did in Lumero's life. Also, read the manga. It is so good.